There's one that says, this is just, bales just found floating. 22,000 pounds of marijuana, 11,000 pounds, 2,000 pounds of cocaine. 2,000 pounds of cocaine found floating. This isn't like a bale. 2,000 pounds of cocaine floating.
More than a dozen agents of the FDLE Tactical Operations Team.
Our evidence dictates that at certain times, these individuals were conspiring to import tons of cocaine.
You'll be surprised at what goes on at FDLE behind the scenes. Before a case ever hits the headlines, people have worked hundreds of hours to solve that case. You want to know what goes on at FDLE? Come on, I'll show you what goes on at FDLE.
Every day you go to the office, you'd be doing something different. It just never stopped, and it was fun.
There was no going home. You wanted to work. You wanted to go out and find the next load.
If you could not be successful as an agent, you need to sell real estate.
But let me say now that what was happening in South Florida is an example of the increasing sophistication and power of organized criminal enterprises and the grave danger that they pose to our nation.
Do you want to be or be eaten?
It was just inordinate amount of cocaine coming in.
See this cute little vial here? It's crack, rock cocaine. You think it's the glamour drug of the 80s? Well, that's the point of this friendly little reminder. It can kill you. And if you've got to die for something, this sure as hell ain't it.
You probably couldn't find a $100 bill in South Florida that didn't have cocaine residue on it.
Fentanyl has definitely taken the front line.
They have been flooding the United States of America with fentanyl.
Thinking about how does that get into our state?
There's no lower level drug anymore.
Battling, it's a constant battle.
From our humble beginnings in 1967 as the Bureau of Law Enforcement with just 94 members, to today's statewide, nationally recognized organization with over 1,500 members. FDLE is headquartered in Tallahassee, with offices located throughout the state from Pensacola to Key West. FDLE responds to the criminal justice needs of national, state, and local law enforcement agencies, as well as to you and to me, the citizens of Florida and our visitors.
The Florida Department of Law Enforcement offers all kinds of careers in law enforcement. We're a diverse group from many professional and ethnic backgrounds. We handle a variety of cases that involve narcotics, organized crime, career criminals, and fugitives. Everyone in the department, from secretaries to special agents, provides some kind of support to solve these cases. Teamwork is the key.
I was working as an engineer at an aerospace company in Dallas. FDLE was trying an experimental recruiting program.
Now, when you come to work at FDLE, we do work hard, but we still find time to enjoy each other's company.
Saw the ad, so I went and did the interview. Sold me a bill of goods, and 28 years later, I walked out the door. I opened the Sebring office back in '75, and we were covered up with smugglers, marijuana, cocaine. The way it was worked at that time, the organizers were in Miami.
FDLE, we were kind of in the middle of it. Buck was here when they had 10 agents in the whole South Florida between West Palm. I mean, they used to tell me stories about that, and I was like, man. And they would run around all over the place, but that's when they had nothing. They were a handful of guys. That's kind of how it all started. Good friend of mine was working as a duty officer with FDLE. Called me one day, says, hey, they got a spot open as a duty officer. Are you interested? We got hired. They sent us to the police academy at Pat Thomas in Quincy. And I was the guy that they asked to go back to Miami because I was from Miami. So it was kind of like a no-brainer. People didn't know a lot about us. People didn't know who we were. We back then were just one very small agency in Miami among a bunch of big agencies. So we kind of had to find our niche.
America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse. In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive.
At one point we had West Palm, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, and Key West as part of the Miami region.
Not that many agents throughout the state to include support staff. That's a lot of real estate to cover with that little bit of people.
The big scale drug smuggling was just getting started.
The Domestic Cannabis Eradication Suppression Program in Florida. Enough marijuana was produced to supply every man, woman, and child in Florida with 56 cigarettes. This marijuana had a street value in excess of $79 million.
We'd worked on a lot of traditional organized crime still. The government wasn't protecting the airspace. The coasties weren't protecting against the water traffic. So we just didn't have the manpower. Of course, we always worked with other departments. We never called them task forces. We just worked together. You know, all this stuff's come in, and you've seen these low-flying planes come in, and to determine it wasn't a threat and let them go. Well, I don't know how you can determine it's not a threat. I mean, how about if they dropped a gallon of LSD in the Miami water supply or something, you know?
FDLE was sort of a dream of mine at the time, the epitome of law enforcement. So I applied and I went through the process and I was selected. I was selected to go to the March 78 class, the second FDLE class. During that period of time, I was an agent in Key West. Key West had the majority of agents that were assigned down there because of the influx of marijuana. Marijuana was just coming in by the tons. Enormous amounts of marijuana that was literally weighing down the 80-foot shrimp trawlers.
The 65-foot shrimper Kone turned around and headed back toward Colombia after being sighted by the Coast Guard in international waters near Haiti.
The Coast Guard would, of course, board these boats when they saw that the water was literally coming over the top of the shrimp boat.
Coast Guard personnel worked for 4 hours pumping out the boat and the 20 tons of marijuana aboard it.
In the 70s, it was the marijuana smugglers.
Okay, we're ready.
Okay. Can you please state your name, spell it, and give me your title?
It's Michael D'Ambrosia, D''Ambrosia, and I'm an assistant special agent in charge in the Miami region.
And how many years have you been with FDLE?
20 plus years.
Okay.
I was a special agent supervisor, and assistant special agent in charge with the Miami office of FDLE. When I worked at First River PD, our office was next to a Marine Patrol office. Those guys were constantly seizing weed. The shrimpers on the West Coast used to use their boats to bring weed from Mexico into the United States, and tons of it. Like you can get a lot of weed on a shrimp boat.
That was probably 3 times a week. So it was something else.
The drug smuggling operation was based in Miami but used shrimp boats from Key West to drop large quantities of marijuana at storage areas in the Florida Panhandle. The alleged kingpin of the operation is Manuel Villanueva, being escorted here with a towel over his head.
The Keys was running and gunning, man. It was drugs all up and down the Keys. That's where all the weed came in, man.
His attorney says the Cuban alien is an electrician, but authorities say he was the organizer and financier of the largest marijuana smuggling operation ever uncovered in the United States.
This operation, to give you some scope of the size of it, we estimate that the net income, or the gross income to the organization, would have been about $300 million.
And they made a lot of money, but they lost a lot of dope too. I mean, they'd get caught.
In making the announcement of the indictment from Tallahassee, Department of Law Enforcement Commissioner Jim York says assets and property of those indicted, including this marina and restaurant in Key West, will be seized. So far, only 2 of the 12 are in custody. Villanueva is being held on $20 million bond. Robert Gilmartin, Channel 4 News.
Everglades City was a sleepy fishing town in the 60s, 70s. And then all of a sudden, those sleepy fishermen were driving Porsches, and they were not fishing their catch. They were bringing in, at the time, marijuana.
It was called one of the nation's biggest crackdowns on marijuana smuggling. Seemingly middle-class fishermen alleged to have smuggled in over $150 million of marijuana over a 3-year period. The profits were astounding.
It was amazing when you'd see the gold chains around their neck. You know, these were fishermen at one time.
Okay. I travel around the world. I travel around the United States. And when people find out that I work for FDLE, everybody knows that FDLE is the #1 agency, definitely here in the state of Florida, if not the country.
I used to work at the bank as a bank teller, assistant bank teller, while I was going to high school. There was a City of Miami police officer working off duty, talked me into signing up and joining the police department. Started as an agent, hired as the special agent in charge of the Miami Regional Operations Center. Marijuana is always marijuana. We had a case where they brought in marijuana from the Keys in a motorhome, and the marijuana packages were stacked between the outer wall and the inner wall of the motorhome, and you couldn't see it. You could search all you wanted, but you could smell it.
Sooner or later, we're going to have to face terrorist incidents in this country. And I think the state of Florida is just wise in preparing to respond to those incidents.
Moved to Tampa and got a job with Tampa PD. Became familiar through them with FDLE. Liked that statewide jurisdiction. Got hired with FDLE. Was an agent in Tampa from 1982. In 1982, I got promoted to be an SAS and transferred to Miami. And my world changed.
Vice Command Post, the Omni details taken a 1097.
Mid-70s, marijuana was really the big prominent import. Almost all of the importations coming into Florida had some kind of connection to South Florida, to Miami. That began to change right after Mariel.
I came from Cuba back in 1962. And when we came, which is me and my mother, with just the clothes that we were wearing, my mom wanted to go back to the house and get something. I said, Mom, we're never coming back here. Well, I got to lock the house. I said, don't worry about it. They're going to take the house anyway. I got to come because my dad was involved in the Bay of Pigs invasion. And he got released from prison in Cuba. And I came 3 days later after he was released and came here. My ship was the first ship that came in. It was 1,200 of us. I was about 13 years old. We got on the boat. So I went to sleep. About 5:30 in the morning, a merchant marine comes, wakes me up and said, Tony, I want to show you something. He takes me up to the deck and he said, look at both sides. I look at both sides of the ship. There was 2 U.S. destroyers escorting us to Florida. And I said, what are they doing here? And he says, well, the Castro government wanted to sink the ship. So these 2 destroyers are going to escort us to Florida. That American flag was beautiful. Totally amazing. That was a great experience on my part. Well, the Mariel boatlift was a total different.
The Body Snatcher, an appropriate name for a rusted old shrimp boat jam-packed with Cuban refugees. It is part of what is believed to be the final exodus of boats from Mariel. There are reports that the Cuban government has ordered an end to the refugee sea lift. All boats were to have left Mariel by today. At 4:30 this afternoon, 20 boats were spotted heading across the rough Gulf Stream waters toward Key West.
I was sent down there with another agent, Danny Benitez. And as soon as we landed there, chief of police, and he knew that we were coming down. No one ever told him. He met us on the plane and says, we got everything under control. You boys can go home now. Well, that is not going to happen, okay? So me and Danny, we went right to the naval base where the boats were coming in. And there was already 3 boats were arriving. That was the first 3 boats that ever got there. As we're there, the first boat is coming in for about 127 people on board. We can't stop these people. There's no way. They were coming off and running into the city. So I'm going, let's see what we're dealing with first. The boat comes in, find out who the captain was. I asked permission to come on board, and I told the passengers that in Spanish, just stay put, we'll get you off the boat soon. Every boat that came in had a family member with 3 or 4 kids. But the rest of them, in a lot of the boats, were criminals or really pretty bad people.
Hundreds, thousands of single men. Look at their shoes, a Marine mutters as the long lines shuffle forward. They all have the same shoes, Cuban prison issue.
So I'm going, wow, we got a problem, and we got more boats coming in, and it's just the 3 of us. I called Tallahassee, and I told him, I said, you need to tell the governor that this is what we're finding out. I was, believe it or not, they put the governor on the phone with me. I said, Governor, says, this is what we have going on. And I said, we got boats coming in. I said, we can't stop them. We don't have the manpower or even the authority to do that. He says, I'm going to call Jimmy Carter right now. And Jimmy Carter told him, they're all welcome to America. There was no FBI, no customs. 90% of them were in jail. They brought the trucks into the prison, they loaded us up, took us to the port, and put us in this boat. I felt like these people need to be in jail.
There have been 8 murders in Dade in just the past 48 hours, most of them involving Mariel refugees. Early today, a policeman was killed in a car crash while chasing a Mariel robbery suspect. The Mariel bad guys are not novice criminals. They had records in Cuba before Castro sent them here last year. Many of them, being detained at the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary, are being released by order of a federal court. Today, Dade County's medical examiner had some tough comments on the subject. They qualify as a guest editorial opinion.
Castro put a good one over on us. Despite what the federal judge up in Atlanta says, there are a lot of criminals who came over in the Mariel boatlift, and we are paying the price now, and no one in Washington is doing a thing about it. We have been invaded, and incidentally, I think it's important to remember that there are people in the world who are wicked and who are evil.
$125,000 came over. We were totally unprepared for it. Totally unprepared.
It was President Carter's open arms that brought the Cubans here, unprepared to cope with life in this new world.
And as soon as the president said they all can stay, well, guess what? More people come.
Nearly 600 more crossed the Florida Straits and landed at Key West over the weekend. More Haitians also waded ashore. Nicaraguans have gone to federal court seeking treatment equal to that given Cubans and Haitians. Meanwhile, Miami, or what's left of it, bears the burden.
We didn't have a mass migration plan. That was the first case where all these folks come in. There's no federal funding for it. And the president just releases everybody into the internal state of Florida. Florida taxpayers have to pay the burden for it.
A symbol of Fidel Castro's cleverness and skill in creating a farce of U.S. immigration policy. Maybe a tent city on the White House lawn would get the message across to the occupant inside. There are now more than 700 Cuban immigrants living in the very heart of Miami.
When you have 700 men and women, some few women, living together, you will have some problems between them.
Overnight, that community is now plussed up 2 to 3 times more. And you don't have the money or funding to do that, or the tax base or the revenue to continue to do that. So that is where it can get strain and stress on the system.
We had people that were coming in on the Mariel boatlift that were residing under I-95 because there was nowhere to put them.
Tent City is fast becoming a makeshift slum, a ghetto of 711 sponsorless Cubans under the expressway in the heart of Miami.
Miami's tent city has become a tense city, a squalid, makeshift, frustrating, and exasperating place.
And that's basically, how they lived. It was insane. The amount of crime that went up was remarkable.
Miami in the summer used to be a town where little or nothing happened. Flagler Street was devoid of people. What has happened in a short span of years to transform this sun and surf paradise into one of the world's leading cities of terror?
About 3 months after the Mariel boatlift, 2/3 of the people in the stockade at that time were for the Mariel boatlift. After just a few months,
a new group of defendants appear for their first court hearing. 68 new names added to the Dade County court system. Of these 68 men, 15 are recently arrived Cuban refugees. 3 give their address as Tent City. It is not known exactly how many Cuban refugees have pending criminal cases. The Dade State Attorney's Office isn't keeping counts, neither is the Public Defender's Office. What is certain is that the refugees are putting a strain on the court system.
I remember back then we had subpoena logs. During that time, subpoenas quadrupled the amount of subpoenas because of all the arrests we were making.
So far, there have been 332 murders countywide this year. Last year, there were 221 killings for the same period.
The Dade County Jail, which was built to handle 800 prisoners, is now packed with more than 1,000, and officials are blaming the overcrowding on the Mariel Key West boatlift.
What's happened to the crime rate on Miami Beach since these people started arriving here?
It has soared. It has soared in the worst possible areas, and that is crimes against persons. Aggravated assaults, rapes, robberies are up tremendously, in excess of 100%.
Mariel were people who had been thrown out of Cuba, who were not necessarily coming because they wanted to come to America.
No, it's possible, leave you here.
Only I know. Everybody here, he say go to Cuba, you know? Because here many hungry, not supposed to live here, you know? I love you, my people, all right? I don't like living here. Everybody, people, you like go to Cuba, yes or no? Yeah.
They were coming to profit on what they could get out of America. And that was a big difference.
Many local officials say they have to have federal help.
But you're going to have to quit treating this national problem that we have here in this area as a local problem and put the resources and money and people and agents in here to cope with it.
A lot of people come in one area. You know, you're budgeted for X amount of police investigations, schools, or politicians going up to Washington, D.C. to try to tell them that we need assistance, support because of this major influx of people into the state of Florida.
The federal government is now on the verge of substantially increasing that debt by slashing federal refugee assistance and dumping this burden on Florida.
Graham says he doubts that Florida will ever see that $80 million, but he's urging Floridians to express their outrage to halt the uncontrolled flow of refugees into Florida.
They turned a blind eye to the state of Florida, causing a burden on the taxpayers and the infrastructure.
Governor Graham attacked both the proposed cuts in federal refugee assistance and the plan to admit more refugees to the nation's shores. The governor told committee members Dade County's 150,000 Cuban and Haitian refugees are a federal responsibility.
If Congress cannot or will not provide sufficient funding to meet the basic needs of refugees, then the numbers being admitted must be decreased.
It's not just turning a blind eye on the taxpayers to try to find a way to support it. It's turning a blind eye on the ones who are fleeing coming here because now they're kept in tent cities for extra, even longer time frame instead of allowing them to integrate faster.
You cannot expect states or their localities, especially in this time of major cuts in other federal domestic assistance programs, to assume any more of the fiscal burden for refugees than we already carry. What we are not willing to accept are changes which are simply a way of cutting the federal budget and shifting responsibilities for refugees to the state and local level. We will vigorously oppose changes which have that objective.
You know, you have things that people need and they need quick money. Cartels are able to pounce on that and was able to utilize folks to pawn and sell the drugs.
The administration plans to admit 170,000 refugees in 1982. Governor Graham argues there isn't enough money available now to help refugees already here. And the governor says it would be dangerously irresponsible for the administration to admit even more refugees without providing for them. Mark Trank, Channel 4 News, Washington.
And it is in violent crimes that we show the biggest increases. 25.6% more murders were reported. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement admits those statistics are significant, but they say they're the result of increasingly heavy drug trafficking.
You know, here you got a country that opens you doors. You're going to come in and you're going to screw it up? That ain't going to happen. Not if I can help it.
From that, the city of Miami Police Department, again being completely unprepared in terms of its number of Spanish-speaking officers.
It changed literally overnight, and suddenly there was so much crime that it was hard for local law enforcement as well as us to keep up with what was going on.
This is where it all started. The boats, small and large, dumping over 120,000 refugees on these docks. That sign, "Will the last person from Cuba please turn out the lights," was supposed to be a joke, but no one knows how many more boatloads of refugees will arrive at this dock, or how many tents and barracks they will call home before their long journey is ended.
And then those people turned out to be later on, they start doing the cocaine trafficking.
I was a special agent with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement for 30 years and continued to be a reserve special agent now for 6 years. Within my first week on the job, they had me working on Undercover. Cocaine was so abundant in this area.
This was a major importation point for South American cocaine. I'd worked for the state since '82 with another state agency. When I came to the Miami area, they were still feeling the effects of the Mariel. A lot of drug importation, drug trafficking, violent crime. Miami was a central importation point for narcotics, which ultimately winds up in other parts of the country.
Hello, my name is Joyce Dawley. I'm the Regional Director for FDLE, Orlando Regional Operations Bureau.
I started at FDLE in 1981. I started as a secretary. I became a property manager and the operations manager, and then in '83 became an agent. Crime was really on the rise in Miami. It was a very fast city, a lot of bars, a lot of fun, a lot of gambling. Organized crime had moved down from New York into Miami in the 70s and 80s, and there was an opportunity for legitimate business and opportunity for criminal enterprise to grow, and it did. And one of the main products that they produced was drugs.
It's family, familial, it's also friendships, it's also just business. And once the drugs started getting into the organized crime world, a lot of things changed.
The use of pleasure drugs other than alcohol by more and more Americans. Not celebrities, not slum dwellers, but adult, middle-class Americans who get their fun by chemically altering their brains with pills, pot, cocaine, and a variety of other substances, many of them illegal, many of them dangerous.
So whatever that takes, they do that through violent crime. If you go against them, there's things your family gets punished. People back in your home country get punished, but they increase the yield. That's just business 101.
Predominantly, the majority of the people are the average Joes. People that get up every day to go to work, whether they go to work at an office or at a factory or a construction job. And then you had those that their job was simply to import drugs, the CEO, so to speak, and his lieutenants, and so on down to the distributors, much like a business.
The house had nothing but a couple of beds, some sheets. They were using a blanket for a curtain. Nothing in the kitchen at all. Like I mentioned, nothing at all, not even a can of beans, much less milk for the baby.
Well, I worked for the City Line Police Department for 34 years, since I was a young man. One of the bullets hit me in the foot, and I felt the burning. So the bullet, what it did was, it hit the ground, it ricocheted, and it came here, and it just pulled my skin back. My son, I called him, he responded to the scene. He was a cop back then. And I was barefooted. He says, "Hey, old man, you got you." When I was looking at retiring, I have worked with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement with some of the agents, and I like what they did. I was not ready to retire, and I figured, you know what, let me look into that. So retired on March 9, 2015, on a Friday. And the following Monday, I got a call from FDLE. So I immediately went back to work and joined FDLE, and here I am. A lot of these drug traffickers mainly traffic in marijuana. However, the times were changing into cocaine, which is being brought into Miami, and drug dealers are being very innovative.
They need the structure themselves in order to operate. You need the ability to get the drugs into the country, and when you get them here, to house them, break them up, distribute them, get them to the other people.
Cocaine smugglers making U.S. deliveries usually start their rounds in Miami.
It kind of hit overnight. Marijuana was the drug of choice for many years. Cocaine comes in and it took South Florida by storm.
Estimates are that as many as 100,000 illegal Colombian aliens are living and working the drug trade in South Florida. The Miami-Colombian connection is 80% of a $20 billion annual cocaine business.
So where the Colombians were getting like $3,000 a key at that time, the Cubans who were wholesale were getting $20,000 a key. So the Colombians decided they'd like to have that part of the business too.
Marijuana was high bulk. You might get a good return, but you had to deal with storage, you had to deal with movement, you needed bigger vehicles to do it. Cocaine, not so much.
What we knew was the pathway was drugs came into Florida, usually through Miami, could be offloaded here, warehoused here, and then transported to other parts of the country.
They come from Colombia by boat and plane to Nassau, from there to Bimini and on to Miami on speedboats, fishing boats, and planes. From Miami, they travel to large Colombian settlements in New York and New Jersey.
And that was a transshipment point that they would sell to offloaders who would sell it then to go to New York, to Atlanta, to St. Louis, to Chicago.
They find the path of least resistance. It was an easy transit route to just load a car with cocaine or other drugs and drive it straight up 95 and hit all the East Coast cities. As all the drugs were going north, the couriers would then turn around and bring all the money south.
Because most of the drugs at the time were not coming across the southwest border, and I-10, some of it still was, but most of it was coming up on boats and being offloaded or being flown in smaller airplanes in very rural counties.
Looking at what I saw down here on this visit, I'm confident I can go back and argue very forcefully that the major drug support that's coming in here, the major supply, is coming into Florida and not coming in through the Mexican border. And to let up at all here would be very tragic and very wrong.
There was a landing strip in Isla Morada somewhere. There was also a landing strip near Sebring. And that landing strip was somewhat popular because at night they would just put little torches out and then they'd light them. The plane would come down, they'd put the torches out, and then they would offload, what was in the airplane.
For $50,000 to $100,000 a flight, the smuggling pilot will do almost anything. Not just fly lights out at night, but even use waterbeds full of gasoline as auxiliary fuel tanks. That makes the smuggling plane a flying time bomb.
They started having problems with fuel in Colombia. So they take the plane down with these big bladders in it, and the cargo hull filled with fuel. We had this plane wired. So we saw the plane fly into the airstrip. All of a sudden, the plane disappeared. They had a tanker truck. They went out there and filled up the bladders and actually overloaded the plane a little bit. He couldn't clear the trees at the end runway. And they were loaded, it was like a flying bomb, loaded with all that fuel. So they crashed into the trees and burned it up and killed the pilot and co-pilot.
The Bahamas are littered with the remains of smuggling aircraft, and in South Florida, smuggling-related crashes have increased astronomically.
A lot of these planes had old radio engines, and the Sebring Airport had a lot of expertise there left over from World War II. A lot of them bring their planes up there to get them serviced. So we ended up identifying a lot of them, do a lot of intelligence work, breaking into planes, putting on beepers and transponders, breaking it legally, of course, with warrants.
Early this morning, Customs and FBI agents began a roundup of 12 people authorities say helped transport nearly 20,000 pounds of cocaine into this country by sea and by air from Colombia.
Things got a little tighter with the feds helping.
Tonight in his special report, Bahamas, Islands in the Stream of Drugs, News Center 7's Robert Gilmartin has an exclusive look at the bandit team and a drug bust that took them in and out of the Bahamas.
Back then, Customs had Black Hawks, and they would fly. As it got so bad, and the federal government says, we got to do something about this, they start putting a lot more helicopters in the air.
How long has this guy been flying, Ralph? Since 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon. Oh, my God. 12 hours.
A customs jet is tracking the drug plane over the Bahamas. It sneaks up behind him within feet to get a tail number.
And the guys tell us stories about being chased by customs across the water and pitching it. And, I mean, these guys were desperate guys. They had nothing else. They didn't care.
The chase begins in earnest at dawn.
You're coming down. Want to play games? Okay, let's play games.
The Customs Black Hawk is playing tag with a drug plane. It passes dangerously close under the Black Hawk.
A lot of times when your kids' bales would wash up on the beach.
As the dopers decide to ditch their drugs into the ocean.
He's dropping. He's airdropping. He's airdropping in the cloud right now.
They pitch them, and the damn currents take them in, man. You go to the beach, you see a load of, I mean, that wasn't uncommon at all. At all. And that's just kind of the way it was.
A Customs infrared camera records the Black Hawk blocking the drug plane's getaway. On the ground, the takedown begins.
We met the kid who flew the drugs, flew right out of Colombia. He was in his 20s. and he was a pilot, and he told us stories that how they crashed on runways, how the plane caught fire in his hands, he had to jump. I mean, this kid was a drug smuggler.
One landed on the Sawgrass Expressway.
I can't even remember how many loads he ran, but he goes, it's hit or miss, man. He goes, really? He goes, I could die at any time.
Customs agent Percival Jordan's job is to get the pilot to cut his engine. The universal sign, he says, is when he racks his shotgun at the pilot's head.
He flew loads after loads after loads, man. And we got him, but he cooperated with us and he gave us everybody.
During my tenure as flying helicopters and doing drug interdiction on the high seas, we intercepted so many go-fast boats trying to get into the Keys. Florida was one of the primary spots because of the Keys, the relationship with the Bahamas. We were having to learn on the fly. People will try different things to bring it in, whether they give it to fishermen, distribute it between a bunch of different boats and letting them go out like cockroaches, bringing in the different areas, fishing towns, or to the rivers and to the inland areas of the state of Florida. Around the high seas looking for those type of bigger mothership vessels as they were bringing it closer to shore. It's very hard to do unless you got intel in host countries, everything from Central America to Jamaica, all the way around, even Cuba. Cuba would actually let us know, the United States know when the boats are leaving, because they at the same time want to do the same thing we're doing, which is stop some of the bad actors.
You can do drops all day long and have people there to pick it up, or you have inordinate amount of canals. They would take vessels and keep them 10 miles out. Boats would go out there, load onto a boat, come in through the cuts with no running lights, you can't see them, and just offload in somebody's backyard and go out again and nobody would know.
Back in the early days, man, we would just, you could be driving to work and see a boat on a trailer and you would just follow it. If you saw those boats, they were out there for one reason. They were running dope.
The offloads of cocaine was done by a mothership and maybe 3 or 4 go-fast boats, and then they would make their way to different locations on the peninsula. If one of them got taken down, it was fine. That's the cost of doing business. But 3 got in. Oftentimes, one of the boats would almost make themselves available. So then the Coast Guard would chase them while the other boats made their way in.
We picked up on that quickly, so it's a matter of, okay, we know they're coming in here because we got that tip, but now we got to watch these other areas of our coast. We have a wide open coast. I always say go fast because they have, usually they're 32, 36-foot vessels, very sleek, 2, 3 engines on them, and they try to outrun Coast Guard or Customs.
If Customs chased them, they didn't care. They could outrun Customs.
Every time you see a boat, you start worrying.
The stories are endless. Nearly every yachtsman in the Bahamas area tells of big black boats or cigarette racing boats, so-called drug boats, approaching them or a friend.
A long, elongated front on a high-speed boat with 4 outboards in the back.
Your light's right on him. Dead ahead about 50 yards.
I call it the day of cockroaches. The DEA plane was flying over with their FLIR. All the boats were lit up by the P9. All the fast boats were connected to a freighter and they were offloading the cocaine to all these different fast boats. I guess at some point, somebody must have seen the flyover and the cockroach boats just went out in all different directions.
Target's turning back to the left. Your target's turning back to the left. It's right on him. Dead ahead about 50 yards. He's moving again. He's running. Just let him do what he has to do. He's shooting. You see it spraying the water? Yeah, I see it.
Called FDLE, and I said, hey, every agency for themselves. I just remember all over there were seizures. Miami Beach, there was a seizure, and the one I'm mentioning on Key Biscayne.
The chase netted 2,712 pounds of cocaine, the largest bust since President Bush's drug speech last week, and 17 arrests.
And that was the NERMA. I remember a big briefing on that. It was the largest seizure of cocaine in U.S. history.
You'd have to say that Miami is to cocaine what Detroit is to cars relative to the management, the organizational entities that are located here in the distribution.
Authorities hope to have hit one major distribution center operating in South Florida hard enough to make a difference in the war on drugs.
If you catch a guy with a bag with $1 million in it, and you say, "Where'd you get that money?" He says, "That's not my money." "Oh, really?" "No." "Okay, well, then give it to me. I'm going to seize it." "Well, okay, but you got to give me a receipt." "Well, it's not your money." Because he needed a receipt to go back and say he lost it. Because if he doesn't go back at a receipt, they think he stole it. And guys, they kill him. I mean, you lose that much money, and they look at you and say, "You're not going to arrest me?" "No, I'm not going to arrest you." See you. And that's how we would develop informants.
The arrest of these three men culminated a 3-year investigation by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement dubbed Operation Snowstorm. Snowstorm because of the 1,400 pounds of cocaine known as snow among dealers that agents seized during 2 raids.
But after that seizure of 826 pounds of cocaine, charges were not filed against those arrested in the house. Instead, agents allowed them to go free so that they could continue their investigation. 7 months later, it paid off.
At that time, it was in the best interest of the case not to pursue it, because in doing so, we would limit our ability to go further into the organization.
A big part of the investigations was informants, and managing the informants is probably one of the most important aspects of a narcotics investigation.
They put a lot of effort back in the day on source development. Criminally, or people that just happen to be somewhere that know something. Part of your evaluation was how many human sources do you have? You had to have at least 2 sources. If you don't have any, how are you helping to solve crimes? How are you getting information to start investigations? Sources help solve cases, and they help get you the information you need to get on a case and follow through with it to the end.
That's our guy.
Great. Most of the work that was done in the Miami region was drug cases.
Yeah, it looks like our guy's from Miami.
Terrific. I'll call Miami right away.
Use source, but we always make sure we introduce an undercover.
If we can get an undercover agent to go with informant when the meetings start at the beginning, it makes it a lot easier. Because you come into the meeting and you get introduced by the informant, then the informant leaves, and then the agent is in. And then if there's an agreement, then you choose a place to do it, and then we'll make it happen. They'll get one room. They don't know that we have the room next to them. And then they make the transaction. When they leave the room, we jump on them, and the party begins.
The kid couldn't get to his source. They didn't want to just take him. So I meet with both of them undercover. And it brings in his connection. He said, well, let's all do a line together. I said, I don't do that shit. I said, this is business for me. The guy says, well, what do you want to do? That did not sound good to me. But I was armed. But I didn't want to blow the case. And the other guy says, just sell it to him. So he needed the money, and he was getting a piece, so it worked out well. But it's not a good thing to hear, saying, well, what do you want to do? I guess it's kind of like method acting in a way. But you always have to keep 10% of your mind. You're a cop. You know, there's things you can't do, things you can't say. Go somewhere for coffee or shooting a breeze, you talk about the dolphins.
Deep. It's open. He's there. 30-yard line. 20. It's Duper. Duper into the...
The more time you spend with them that's not involved with the crime, the more you have to watch yourself as far as, you know, make sure you don't slip up. So you just put yourself in that other role and keep that 10% open. A lot of them understood that's their job was to be a crook. My job was to catch them.
There was one time where I was asked to do Undercover in Marathon. I acted as a money person out of Chicago, and I was supposed to buy 10 kilograms of cocaine. The cocaine at the time was $70,000 a kilo. Got out of the plane in Marathon, got a hotel room. We had 2 rooms. One of the rooms had agents in it, and we wired the room I was in. And we met the Colombian guy. I need to see some of the money. I said, you can see all the money. And I popped the suitcase open in there, and I thought he was going to faint. I don't think he ever saw that much money before. We eventually arrested him, but the cocaine was available, and the price was very, very high, and the price was met.
So that phase of seeing huge amounts of the drugs on the streets became huge amounts of money now on the streets, millions of dollars, literally physically changing hands.
As we've shown you, drug money can work around the law without violating it. However, the cocaine economy does violate our public health.
Had it made it to the streets for sale, it's a good bet addicts and users would have paid as much as $100 million for it. But this is just the tip of the iceberg when you talk about the destructive force of cocaine, a destructive force that South Florida and the rest of the nation are trying to come to grips with.
It brought so much money into the city. All the cash that was flowing into Miami from the sale of cocaine.
Americans consume more than 50 tons of cocaine every year, spending nearly $40 billion for the illicit drug. Nearly all of that cocaine comes from Latin America, Colombia, Peru, Brazil, and Bolivia. A year-round snowstorm of the drug continues.
Miami was one of the top 5 places in the country at the time for cash coming into the banking system.
$25 million is a paltry figure when you're talking about the amounts of money generated in single narcotics transactions. That's nothing. Hundreds of millions of dollars are involved.
Pilots can be paid as much as $100,000 for a single night's work. On the low end of the scale, a man can make $15,000 in one night just helping unload a boat full of marijuana. And relatively few drug traffickers ever get caught.
So these, for the most part, were people that were part of the have-nots, who came across money. They figured out ways.
When you buy 5 kilos, and even at $12,000 a kilo, you're looking at $50,000. That is a weekly business for somebody. When you talk to the people that you arrest and you go, why did you get into this? They said the money was so good. It was like them being on crack cocaine, just getting the money and the lifestyle. They got accustomed to it.
Drug profits are so enormous, smugglers can afford boats that can easily outrun the Coast Guard. Airplanes can be left behind and written off as overhead.
It's a $7 billion a year retail business. That's about $12,000 for each household in Dade County. Half that amount is returned to South America for the wholesale purchase of even more drugs.
It was not uncommon to be driving down the road and see an individual who you knew had no education, had no other means of income, driving a very expensive car, wearing expensive jewelry, and you knew what he was.
People who make $1 million in drug proceeds don't go out and buy a compact car. They go out and buy a high-end luxury car. They don't sell and make $2-3 million in drug proceeds to go out and go to the dollar store to buy their groceries or to buy their clothes. So you have higher-end retail markets where the amount of drug proceeds is high, your retail is high. People have disposable money, and part of what it is it becomes a status symbol too.
If South Florida businessmen are not hooked on drugs, the experts say they can be addicted to drug money. The official voice of the business community figures we stand to lose more than we can ever possibly gain from drug commerce.
People make money to spend money. So that starts to have the trickle effect.
But it is a false economy.
which has driven up the prices of homes, cut honest businessmen out of the marketplace.
Unemployed construction workers marched to protest high interest rates that lock buyers out of homes.
They would buy businesses that were run down. Hotels all along from Miami Beach up to Fort Lauderdale. They also bought movie theaters, gambling halls. They bought restaurants, auto repair places, car lots.
The profits for the drug lords have made the local economy recession-resistant.
We've spoken to several businessmen in respect to how good their business is, particularly in the boating business and in the airplane business, and they all say that it's booming even during a period of recession, and they suspect they know where the money comes from, but they're not going to bite the hand that feeds them.
Any place that they could get their money to look legitimate into a business, whether people were coming and utilizing it or not.
Cash flew through Miami in banks and real estate.
That has rippled into prices for things we buy every day.
More and more money has to be taken out of the tenants who rent, and therefore when you go to your doctor and he pays more rent, maybe that some of that extra rent he pays that costs you a higher medical fee is going to enrich this illicit industry of investment.
So they were taking the money into the banks. Sometimes they walk in to buy a house for cash or cars. If you run that money through with the canine dogs, you can smell like cocaine coming.
Because they were using houses here as just storage locations. They go back to it later. If they thought there was some kind of heat on them, they would bug out and just leave the dope. We'd go into a house, the only thing would be in a house was like 3 or 4 suitcases, and there'd be cocaine in there. They'd be filled with cocaine. So we would just take that. There'd be no arrest, but we'd take the cocaine.
We would seize millions upon millions of dollars of cash, cash in boxes, cash in the wall.
You know, you'd hit stash houses down here, man, you'd find 500-600 kilos. But that wasn't like, oh my God. Shit happened all the time. I mean, you would come across shit in the back of a damn U-Haul truck and open it, and you'd find 500 kilos of cocaine.
The culture back then is everybody was doing cocaine. There was a lot of rich people doing it, a lot of affluent people doing it, and it just took off.
Miami was still a really, really simple place. At the same time, the drug smuggling at the time really was starting to make a name for itself. The amount of drugs you would read about and hear about.
Miami seems to have become paradise lost.
It started to make a name even before it was seen in the movies. It was just by word of mouth. You would read about it in the papers. Across the whole country, Miami started making a name for itself as the drug capital, not just of the U.S., I think pretty much the drug smuggling capital everywhere in the world.
That I remember getting a call in the middle of the night. One of the guys we worked with got shot. And Chambliss calls me in the middle of the night. Hey, Chris got shot. He was out with a gang. I was working a gang case. We're all going to go.
So that's, we had the big wars between the Colombians and the Cuban drug dealers.
Tragic and senseless example of the hazard of simply living in Miami. If these two citizens could be alive 1 minute, dead the next, what guarantee does anybody here have that Miami's lawless violence won't strike them next? We're becoming a city gripped in fear. Fear to be on the street, in your car, in your home, or even at the ballpark. We are a city crying for a way out.
And then they figure they can get rid of the Colombians. You could drive in downtown Miami, Little Havana, and you have drive-by shootings all the time. It was bad.
Hey, County Police and Fire, do you have an emergency?
Yes, there's a gunfight going out.
Are they shooting a gun or are they threatening?
They're shooting guns and machine guns.
They have guns and machine guns?
Yes. and a car knocked down a tree. They're still shooting.
They are firing shots.
Yes.
Okay, right there. Oh, I hear it now.
You probably couldn't find a $100 bill in South Florida that didn't have cocaine residue on it.